Welcome to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking about what to do during your winter break so you can have some fun but still be productive. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the Catapult Conference. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started.
Welcome back. Today we're talking about what you should do to make the most of your winter break, which you've probably been eagerly awaiting if you've just finished exams.
Yeah, counting down the moments.
I know. Hopefully you're listening to this after exams, but if not, just think. Soon you'll be finished with exams.
Yep.
And I think that's really the number one thing is you've really got to relax and sort of recuperate, not just from final exams, but from really this entire process, particularly if you're a 1L. Like this has been a really intense few months.
I think that that's 100% true. And I think a lot of people really forget to be kind to themselves and give themselves some space. You know, it's likely that you're really close to being burned out, or if you probably are burned out. And so you need to just decompress and do whatever it is you do to decompress. I'll be honest, the first thing I always did, like the day after final exams, and I did this in undergrad too, was like deep clean my apartment and get all of my exam stuff put away, just because I found having piles of paper around or binders or whatever was really anxiety inducing. So, you know, I kind of had to like cleanse my space so I could even sit and do mindless things like, you know, binge watch a TV show or things like that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I would usually like, you know, sleep for like 2 days and then kind of get up and be like, wow, my house is a mess. There's stuff everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And you never know, even crazy stuff could have happened during the exam period that you really haven't gotten to process. I mean, I had computer issues during the exam period one year, and I just kind of had to plow through because I had to finish exams. And I remember finishing all my exams and then really being able to kind of mourn this thing that had happened in my exam taking world. And that's really important to kind of be able to sit with and get past too your feelings of frustration.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like during first semester exams, I wasn't sleeping. So after 2 or 3 weeks of sleeping, maybe 4 hours a night, because I had chronic insomnia, like, you know, as you would imagine, I was a mess, you know, a total mess. So, and, you know, I think I went back to California like a day or two after exams ended. So, you know, it was this kind of like, oh my God, okay, this thing's finished. And now I have to like pack up the whole house and clean it. Oh, now I have to get packed for like weeks on end and like, oh my God. And then I get on a plane and, you know, it's a lot.
It really can be a lot. Or if you're heading home for the holidays and you need to get gifts and things like that for folks and you haven't had time to do any shopping, or maybe you go to I remember I had a group of friends who would do this annual Christmas party when we all kind of went home for the holiday, and I never had anything to wear in law school because, you know, I wasn't like going to parties or anything like that. So I was this frantic, like, I need to go shopping. I have nothing to wear to this party. All I wear is my fleece all day. Like, it's just...
Yeah, they have to remember like how to interact with other people who are not in law school. You know, whether those are like people that you're dating or significant others or family or friends. I mean, and I think too, there can often be, you know, kind of a disconnect because say you have a significant other and you've been working away for exams and you haven't really been seeing them and they're kind of sitting at home bored and alone and they're really excited when you come back and you're finished, but you're so tired and so, you know, burned out and just like tired of thinking and tired of making decisions that all you want to do is sit on the couch and veg for like 2 days. Like that sort of disconnect can be really hard to handle. Because they're like, oh my God, let's go out and do 18 things. You're like, I can't even move.
Right.
You know, like I literally just need like 2 days of not getting out of my pajamas and not really speaking to anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you do about that other than just kind of noticing it and being prepared for it and sort of trying to explain it. But it can be difficult. You know, you're not the only person who suffered here, basically.
Right, right. And
for kids, you know, if you have kids that have been neglected, you know, it's hard.
It can be really hard. And I think, if you can somewhat plan ahead to give yourself a little bit of space just for yourself, and then you can kind of dive back in to family and friends and those responsibilities. But no matter what, just try and take time for yourself. Self-care is so important.
Yeah, I eventually started realizing that like the day after my exams were over, I would try to schedule a massage or something like that. You know, that was just really indulgent and kind of force you to just like let go.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, it can be really, really important. And if you are planning to travel and see family, maybe try and give yourself a day or two. Don't fly out, the day that exams are ending if you can help it. So you have a little downtime to get things together.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake a lot of people make. I definitely made that mistake more than once.
Oh, yeah, me too.
One year, I think I flew to Italy like the day after exams were over to go on a ski vacation. It's just like, really? Like, what was I thinking? This was not a good idea.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be packing. You're trying to study and do that last exam, and then you're supposed to be like packing for, some crazy trip that you're going on. Yeah, you give yourself some breathing room.
Yeah.
Another time, I think I was trying to go back to California, but it was like the New York transit system was on strike, and like, I ended up somehow sleeping through my flight because my roommate and I got really like hammered one night, and like I was like, "There's no subway." Like, oh, it was just such a mess, like such a mess.
Yeah,
I think I ended up getting food poisoning on that trip too. It just always happens. It's just like one thing after another after another.
Mm-hmm. We've been talking about, family or friends or children or other important people in your life feeling somewhat neglected, typically through the end of the semester process. And one of the things you can do, if you're listening to this and you're not in the midst of finals, or you can think ahead for next semester, is try and plan some stuff, after giving yourself a little breathing room that family and friends can look forward to, whether or not it's, a dinner with your group of girlfriends, or it's a getaway with your significant other, or it's a special day at the aquarium with your kids, whatever it might be. If you can do a little of that structure, I think it shows effort that, folks may feel like, okay, well, I know I'm neglected now, but I have these exciting things to look forward to. And, and I think those can be really powerful. Because one of the things I think that's hard for the folks that aren't in the middle of this is it can be very hard to appreciate how selfish you have to be and how inward you have to be thinking and feeling to get through some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very difficult for someone who's not gone through the hell that is a law school exam period to really fully internalize like how horrifically awful it can be.
Yeah.
And, like you're not sleeping, you're probably not eating that well, you're not exercising, like you're not going to be your best self at the end of this like several week exam period. That's just the reality of it.
Right.
But I completely agree. I think, trying to give yourself like a day or two to sort of decompress, sleep in, get some stuff done, and then come up for air with something that's planned, that's fun, that everybody can reconnect on, is a really good idea.
Yep. And I think the other thing to think about too is, especially given the current political climate that is out there in the world right now, there's a lot of information and things to read and a lot of stuff maybe to catch up on if you've been having to stick your head in the sand a little bit to get through stuff. But again, give yourself some space, because you also don't want to come up from air and then spend the entire day on Facebook reading posts that are going to be
basically like, the world's ending, here's how.
Right. That's not going to be good for your mental health either. So just reacclimate to what's going on in the world, and don't, feel like you have to jump into reality with both feet unless you have to, for some reason, jump into reality.
Right. And I think the flip side of that too is if you are like really stressed out about the way the world is going or something, this is also a good time to sort of do something about that, something productive. So whether it is volunteering with an organization that, supports a cause that you feel passionately about, or whatever it is, you've got a few weeks that you could actually go and do something. So then hopefully when you restart classes, you have a different perspective on like, okay, the world's probably not ending. It might be bad, but at least I went and volunteered, with these, whatever. I don't know, take your pick.
Right.
But you did something.
Yeah. Volunteering, donating time, engage if you want to engage in the political process or in the environment that's happening right now. I think it's an opportunity to do that, and you may not have that opportunity during the school year again. So especially if you have kind of an extended winter break, I think you can. get involved with your communities. And I think there's no shortage of ways to help. And that's kind of an opportunity to invest, because you don't want to sabotage your legal career because you're kind of distracted by events. I'd rather you become a lawyer and then be able to do things from the perspective of being a lawyer later.
Yeah, but you might be able to attend a gala fundraiser or something over the winter break, and like that would be fun, and it's good networking, and why not? It might reinvigorate your passion for law school.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, I don't think you have to do just things that are work oriented or school oriented. This really is a time for you to recuperate, to regenerate. Maybe you do some like reading for fun.
What?
The concept sounds so foreign, but remember, you probably used to like to read.
I know. And, it's so hard. I have a pile of books on my desk that I'm totally behind on, which I'm hoping to take on even my holiday breaks. And
I have like a 800-page book for my book club that apparently is really depressing that I just haven't even been able to start.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I was like, really? I am, however, I'm reading the new Salman Rushdie, which I find fascinating and oddly prophetic. So it's called it's a takeoff on 1,001 Nights. So the title is like numbers, something, some number of years and weeks and days and nights. I don't know. I can't remember, but it's a very long title. It's a really good book. It's very interesting.
I'm finishing Gloria Steinem's new book, which is also very timely because it's so politically charged, but I think her perspective on the world is really interesting. And I'm just kind of somebody who likes reading about other people's lives, which you might be able to tell by looking at the rest of the books on my desk, which are Amy Schumer's new book and the new book about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then the book, I think it's The Bitch Is Back or something like that, about short stories about women, I think, in menopause or something like that, which is not, I'm not at that point in life, but I've heard that the stories are really interesting and great. So.
Yeah, so, go to the bookstore, like, browse around. I mean, those do still exist, I think.
They do, and they're fun.
I've heard they still exist some places. But go to Amazon, browse around.
Yeah.
But, you don't have to spend the whole break just trying to be productive. But it is a good time to do certain things. But, I think reading a good book, particularly something escapist, is really a good idea at this point.
Yeah, and it also gives you something to talk about. So, we're going to talk a little bit about maybe doing some networking and trying to meet people, but sometimes reading books or, doing something fun or taking a great hike or trying something new, it gives you something to talk about when you meet people, which can be great because when you meet someone, it's hard to say, well, I've been living in the library for the last 3 weeks. I'm really disconnected with the world and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine in law school, she had to go to some Christmas party because it was like her fiance's work or something. And she was like right in the middle of the exam period. And she came back, she's like, I just realized I cannot have a normal conversation right now. Like I have nothing to talk about. And also like, I just can't even like get it together to pretend to be a normal person because I'm so crazed about these exams.
Yeah. I know. It's just really bizarre. It's a very bizarre period. But if you do want to be a little bit productive, I think there are ways you can do it without driving yourself crazy and not allowing yourself to do anything fun. I think we've got a great podcast episode, if we do say so ourselves, about, which we do, about soft skills. And I think breaks, especially maybe if you live somewhere with really bad weather, so you can't get out of the house a lot, can be a really great time to take an online course. We talked about, exposing yourself to accounting or, business communications or even just, a general business class to be able to function in a firm environment with a bit more wisdom. And I think that that's something great to do. Or if you have an interest in, online companies, even if it's from a legal perspective, like learn about how online companies or online sales works and what sales funnels look like and content marketing and all of that kind of stuff. I think adding to your repertoire of expertise and things you can talk about with some sort of air of, I don't know, having authority or just knowing what you're talking about is only going to serve you well in your job hunt, but it's also just going to make you better at what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there are tons and tons. I mean, if you want a course on like how to sell stuff on the internet or how to market yourself or whatever, those exist.
Yeah.
Like there are millions of them.
Yeah.
And you don't have to pay for them. You can if you want to. But, there are lots and lots of blogs out there. And generally these, they're written for a general interest community. It's going to be a lot more entertaining reading than what you've been doing in law school.
Right. Right. Exactly. Except our blogs, of course, which are totally interesting all the time.
Well, I was referring more to cases, actually.
Oh, yes. Okay, good.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Our blogs are blogs. They're easy to read.
But no, cases are dense. It's going to be refreshing to read anything other than cases, which is why I think actually going back and reading books for fun is such a great exercise, because you remember you can actually read quickly and efficiently, which is almost a shock to the system.
Yeah, even something like, this is an old one, but even like Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Work Week. I think that's... that is extremely eye-opening when a lot of lawyers read it when they're actually lawyers and they're so used to selling their time. But, read it now. Mm-hmm. There are lots of different perspectives on the way that you can have a business. Or it doesn't have to be, just the standard way that firms and organizations have been run so far.
Weren't you just reading a book recently on deep work?
Oh, yeah, the Cal Newport. Mm-hmm. I ordered it. I haven't actually read it
yet.
You
haven't? Okay. But Cal Newport's somebody else who's very interesting. I'm in the middle of
the Salman Rushdie, and I'm in the middle of one called Essentialism, which is basically figure out what's important and do it. But his is definitely on my list.
Yeah. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff out there and worthwhile reading. What about some job stuff? What if you're worried about your job hunt? Can you do some stuff over the winter break?
Well, absolutely, because you could start applying for jobs on December 1st.
Right.
So you are actually a month behind already. Not to panic, but just FYI. Yeah, this is something I think even first years need to be thinking about is what are you going to do next summer? And that could be, everything from brainstorming to doing some research, but also getting your resume in order, getting your cover letters together. This is a good opportunity because it's not like you're going to have more time once classes start to deal with this. Deal with it now.
Sounds good. Yeah. And I think, hopefully your resume and cover letter are up to snuff, but you really maybe want to even take a fresh look at those. We talk about the importance of having those resumes and cover letters proofed by a lot of people to make sure that they are proofed, I guess, and perfect. Yes. And maybe even going home or spending time with family or friends can give you the opportunity to circulate some of that stuff and get some additional feedback. So even if you think you're done, keeping an open mind and getting some additional perspectives may be really helpful.
Yeah, it's never going to hurt you to have, your uncle who's a lawyer look at your resume.
Right.
Maybe you disagree with him and you don't make the changes he suggests, but at least, having that input of like, oh, yeah, well, I would hire someone or not hire someone based on this. Here's what I think you should do differently. And you're really thinking through, like, what do you want your summer to look like?
Yeah.
It's only December, January, but that's coming up really quickly.
Yeah.
And, you need to be thinking, where can you apply? Like, where are you likely to get an offer? If you are going to school somewhere outside of where you live, where your family lives. For example, I was in school in New York and I was really kind of like based in San Francisco, I guess you could say. So when I was in San Francisco, I tried to set up some interviews because I didn't want to have to fly back across the country 3,000 miles in a week or 3 weeks or whatever. And actually, I ended up having to do that anyway. But at least I did one with like with a government organization while I was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really a good point. And, I think we'll link to it in the podcast notes, but you have a great series on the Girls Guide about informational interviewing, which is such an underlooked networking tool, underutilized networking tool. And breaks are great times to either set up these informational interviews, try and do them. It's a bit of a downtime. If people are in the office around the holidays, it's often not that busy. So it can be a nice time to get on somebody's calendar.
Yeah, people are more likely to, step out for a coffee if it's 2 days before Christmas and they're kind of resentful about being in the office anyway. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people are more likely to, you could set up kind of an informal informational interview where you try to get together some friends who maybe have friends who are lawyers and you all go out to a bar or something and have Christmas drinks or, whatever, holiday. I think even the first day of Hanukkah this year is the 24th. So everyone can celebrate together.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is like a festive time where people tend to be more open to going out and doing things. And so it is a good time to do informational interviews or, try to meet your friends' friends who work at certain places or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And look for things, like the bar associations, maybe having holiday events, end of year events, that kind of thing. It's a time when people are kind of out and about, and it can be an easy way to make some of those connections that, maybe in like March or April when everyone's ramping up for tax season or whatever, like you're not going to be able to do.
Yeah, I think that's really true. So reaching out to people, talking to people, even if you're just setting up appointments when people get back from the holiday break, then they're on the calendar. And once something's on the calendar, it's much more likely to happen, even if it gets moved. Sometimes it's just the challenge of getting on somebody's radar and getting on their calendar.
Yeah, and I think it is typically, a downtime. Mm-hmm. The other thing you could think about doing, we talked about volunteering, but you could also do more specifically legal pro bono work.
Oh, that's a very good point. Or even some legal pro bono training. They might even offer trainings.
Yeah, I think right now there are a lot of people doing, say, for example, immigration pro bono stuff where they need help from law students. They need help from everyone. And if you have language skills or something like that, you could very easily probably spend a few days over the winter break doing some work that could benefit someone and also would be good experience for you and something to put on your resume and talk about in your interviews.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Let's talk about grades coming in.
Oh, do we have to?
Because I do think that this is something that a lot of people like to pretend maybe isn't going to happen over the break. And depending on your school, they might dribble in one at a time, and you may never know when they'll exactly get released, which is a special kind of torture. They might get released in bulk. One section might get their grades, one section might not. There are all sorts of different ways that grades will be handed out. My school did the dribble approach with legal research and writing always coming out first. And so it can be very sobering. It can be very disheartening. It can be a way that you don't really want to celebrate the winter holidays. It's just dealing with some unfortunate grades. But, I think a few things to keep in mind is, especially if you're getting, one grade at a time, that you really need to keep perspective and remember that one grade isn't going to, change the course of your whole law school experience. My first grade was fairly disappointing, and I will totally admit I sat on the floor crying of my great aunt's house while everyone else was in bed because I was so devastated. And it really can shake you, because you've put so much work into it. But on the other hand, once all of my grades came in, it wasn't nearly as bad as I had, thought it was just this one single grade. So you've got to just keep perspective and remember that, doing poorly on one thing doesn't mean your legal career is over. And there's a lot of opportunity for doing better. Hey, we have seen so many people, including ourselves, be able to really turn around our GPAs and change your law school experience. So it's important not to lose
I was
hope.
kind of the opposite.
Okay, that's true.
I did really well first semester, and then essentially had a total breakdown because it was too much pressure, and then did poorly second semester.
But then you got it back together after
I did get it back together.
So see, that was you still came full circle, back, good, positive trajectory.
Exactly. No, my second year was my best year. It was a really solid year. Basically, that was because I picked the right classes, but we don't talk about that. That's a different podcast. But no, I think the great thing, the reality is most people are going to see grades they've never seen before.
Yeah.
And that is not an easy thing to deal with. Particularly, it can be a difficult thing to deal with if you are in a situation where, you're staying with your family or something, and your parents are like, "Oh my God, what do you mean you got a B minus? You're a straight A student," and they don't get it.
Right.
They don't understand the curve. They're just used to you getting straight A's, and so that can be an added amount of pressure on top of the fact that you already feel lousy about the fact that you didn't do as well as you wanted to do.
Yep. It is really shocking to the system. And I think it's important that you remember the realities of the curve. If you don't even know what your school's curve is, why don't you go learn about it or Xerox the page of that part of the student handbook?
Some of them are I've seen curves as low as 2.3 and or whatever.
Brutal.
That's a brutal curve. That's a C plus curve. The average person is going to get a C plus.
Yeah.
That's brutal.
It's really, really, really brutal.
That doesn't happen in most undergrads.
Yeah.
So, I agree. I think grades are really difficult. definitely when they're trickling in over time, like it's easy to totally catastrophize if you get one bad grade. On the flip side, if you get your first grade is great and you're like, yay, I'm a total rock star, and then the next one's not, it's like, oh no. Like it can be a roller coaster. I think it can be helpful to sort of reflect at least a little bit on what might have happened.
Yeah.
Particularly if it's like one class is an outlier, or if on the flip side, if all of your grades are bad, that's something that you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I think that is really something to keep in mind, and just remember that you do want to take a little time while you're not fully exhausted to start to have some serious, conversations with yourself, I guess, which is a strange way to say it. But you do need to sit down and think and evaluate about what you did. What resonated with you? What was a good use of your time? What was a bad use of your time? When students come to us and ask for help figuring out what went wrong, we start at the very beginning. It's like we start at how did you prepare for class? Yeah. Did you do the reading? Did you brief? Were your briefs worth it? Did you use supplements? Why? Why not? Did you read too many supplements? Well, that's a problem. Then it's like, did you outline? Did your outlines work for you?
Did
we're
you
really
practice tests.
Exactly. Exactly.
Did you get feedback? Like, what did your professors tell you?
Yeah. We're really good at what we do, and we can help you do all of that diagnosis, but it's also just an important exercise for you to move, kind of through the semester and think about what were your wins, and then what were your areas for improvement, because no matter what your grades are, everybody can improve. And I think one of the things that we talk about with folks who are successful this first semester is they kind of go into break, they get these grades, and they're like, I am good. I'm good. I don't have to do anything else. I am just like, I'm solid. I'm going to be at the top of my class. And the reality is with the curve, yeah, everybody else is going to do better too. So
yeah, like you could fall off that perch pretty quickly.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of people actually do lose their perch that first semester. And so you don't want to become complacent with it. And I think that that's really important. So no matter how well you did, I think it's still worth evaluating what you did that you liked and what you did that you didn't like, and start making some changes. If you weren't organized enough, like buy a new planner, figure out how you're going to organize your life, learn about bullet journaling, whatever it needs to, whatever you need to do to keep all your ducks in a row.
Yeah, and I think this is also a good opportunity to start to lay the groundwork for getting some feedback from your professors. So, of course, if you get a disappointing grade, the temptation is often to like put it in a box and never think about it again. Mm-hmm. But I think you're going to be a lot better served if you force yourself to send your professor an email that's like, hey, I'd like to come and talk to you after we get back in January. Can I set up an appointment? Like, I'm not disputing my grade or anything. I just want to hear from you about what maybe I could improve on. And typically they're going to be pretty receptive. I think if you can get copies of any of your exams, that's definitely worth doing.
Yep.
And have someone look at them with you, take them to your TA, take them to a professor, take them to a tutor, or whatever it is. Because if you're consistently not doing well, there's probably some sort of pattern. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if something crazy happened, like you want to know what happened there too, so it doesn't happen again.
Right. Exactly. So, best not to just be out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, I guess is what I meant to say. Out of sight, out of mind on all this stuff. Like, this is the time where you can actually evaluate how the semester went because you have time.
Yeah. For the first time in 3 or 4 months, you actually have a little bit of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think people should do anything to sort of get a leg up on their next classes?
I think, to be honest, being rested and organized and get your life in order, I think are some of the best things they can do to get your leg up. Let's say you had some rough financial realities first semester. Do what you can to figure out your finances or rework your budget. If you can set up bills to auto pay so you don't have to remember to pay bills, if you can do things to make your life easier throughout the second semester, I think that that's a great way to invest time. I don't know that pre-reading and things like that are really worth it. I think the other thing is about the job stuff. Job stuff becomes a huge distraction from school, and anything you can do to get your ducks in a row in that department is going to save you a lot of time.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing that sounds a little off the wall, but if you're going to break up with someone, do it during the break. Don't Speaking from experience, like I pretty much had like the worst of all possible worlds as I came back and had like 2 horrible weeks with like my then boyfriend, and we were fighting all the time. And then I went back to school, and then like a week later decided to break up with him. So then in the middle of the start of the semester, I was dealing with breaking up.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we should have just done that like right after Christmas. Yeah.
But maybe it's a good time to evaluate your personal relationships because you have time, and you can have hard conversations. And if you can do those outside of the school period, I think it's wise to do that.
Yeah. I mean, if it's going nowhere fast, just end it.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds harsh, but the reality is you don't have time to deal with this when it's like the middle of February or the end of January and you're 2 weeks into classes. And, then you decide you have to have the big breakup conversation from 3,000 miles away. Like, it's just horrible.
That is pretty brutal.
Do it in person.
Yeah.
All right. Your goal here really is to set yourself up for the next semester. And, ideally you want to go into that semester with your personal relationships in order, your finances in order, you're well rested, you're hyped, you're ready to go. You've thought about, another thing we haven't touched on is if you decide or if you realize that you probably need some sort of accommodations or something like that, like this can be a good time to deal with that. We have a podcast that just came out on that. But, if you need to be evaluated or something, this is the time to do this sort of thing.
Very true. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, just think about our podcast and there you go.
All right. Well, I feel like that's a pretty good to-do list for the break. But make sure you put your feet up and watch some good movies or TV shows or read some good books because that's really of super high importance.
It should be restorative, ideally.
It should. And with that, we're out of time. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee and Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.